my question, if they said we need to do something, and I do want to be happy and talk about all of the good Charles Leclerc things. That to me is very easy. The hard question, if there are any answers to it, is what do we do with Monaco? Because no one wants it off the circuit. I think no
No.
one there may be drivers who want it off strictly for competitive qualities or lack thereof. But I don't think anyone who is a fan, a longtime follower, even a short time follower of the sport wants Monaco off simply because, and I think it's this simple, it looks so cool. Like it is the coolest looking track on the entire tour. It is the one with the most associated tradition, and it is the most photogenic. There is no palette like it for F1 to paint on. So what, if anything, can be done to liven up racing here, short of, as they suggested, naps and mandatory pit stops?
Well, I think naps would be quite interesting. You've got a nap for 15 minutes of the race. Like I don't know how you enforce that even. I think there's two ways. There's two bits to this, right? One is which is what Christian Horner suggested to us on Sunday, is you change the circuit somewhere. You make an overtaking opportunity, whether you widen it somewhere. I'm not sure you can do that because I've actually driven around Monte Carlo when they're building it up, and they literally are using every inch of the road in every place pretty much. So to do that, you're probably going to have to take away a part of the circuit that's kind of already great, and then you're kind of ruining that qualifying spectacle that is so good in Monaco. So I feel like that isn't great. And then a format change is, what do you do? Like I heard some people say a reverse grid, but I think the issue is you can't pass cars. So all you'd have is a slower processional race around the circuit.
Mhm.
I've always wondered, because qualifying is so good, do you hand points out for qualifying as well? Like you almost kind of reward that session. You say like, and then you've got almost double points at Monaco. You've got a bit like what they do in IndyCar with the Indy 500. Like that race is weighted in such a way where if you win that race and you qualify well, it really sets your season up nicely. Not sure, fans would like that as much, but we do have sprint races now, and that's kind of, you get a couple points there. So I don't know. I think format has to be the way because I think you got to save the circuit. The circuit is just great, and maybe you can make the odd change here and there, and it has changed over time. But I compared it the other, like talking to some colleagues. It's a bit like whack-a-mole. I don't know if you guys call it the same, but if you go to the
Mhm.
like to the carnival and you just hit one and then another one pops up, and I feel like if you started changing Monaco's circuit, you'd start finding problems. You're like, oh, you've just taken out the best bit of the lap, or you've ruined the visuals here, or you've whatever it is. So it's a tough one. So I would lean more towards format change, and then you get towards the argument of where you're just making it gimmicky and kind of ruining the weekend. But I think I agree with what George said. Something's got to change on the Sunday, but I'm not kind of I'm not happy to admit I'm not smart enough at this point to know what that is. But I feel like, maybe the one they always talk about is mandatory pit stops. Like you got to pit a couple times. That means they can push more because the issue on Sunday as well was it's the big cars, but also they weren't pushing. I think Alex Albon said to us it was like he said I could have got my Vespa out and driven like instead. It would have been the same experience.
Mhm.
And you just don't want to hear that from a Formula One driver, do you? You want them to say like you want them to get out of the car and say I drove my heart out in that race, and I was dicing with the wall every lap. If you had the tires that could do that, then maybe that would be the way. I know tires isn't always the sexiest thing to throw out into an argument, but for Monaco, maybe it is. Maybe it is the solution.
Who or what is standing in the way of a change when it seems like all the drivers are more or less on board? Lewis Hamilton made similar comments before the race about maybe, different tire compounds. So what is stopping a change there?
So it's primarily has been the organizers for a long time. I think Formula One's been reluctant to make big changes. I think they've kind of left it to the organizers to say, hey, like if you want to, if you've got anywhere that you can change, and a lot of it comes down to the fact that Monaco is a city state. It's not really Formula One's place to say we're going to extend turn one because that's down to the Principality of Monaco to work that out. So I think they've been reluctant to do that, and they've always had the idea of like if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But a lot of people would turn around and say, well, it might be broke, so let's try and fix it. And I think it's easier for them just to do nothing, to kind of lean on the heritage of the circuit, to lean on the fact that so many people do still love Monaco as it is. But I think that this is the first time I've heard the drivers be so willing to be out there with their opinions. Usually you get like the odd nod and a wink, like, hey, yeah, this isn't great, but hey, it's Monaco. This year, every single driver, even on Thursday, the media day, was like, yeah, this place sucks on Sunday. I like even Lewis and Fernando, and I was like, wow, okay. And then by Sunday, you had like Max saying, in the race, I should have brought my pillow with me and all that stuff. It felt like there'd been a change. So I think that should kind of push the boundary there a little bit. And Christian, in that same press session I mentioned earlier, he said we need to look at this collectively. So I think now they have the teams on board to do that. They've got kind of the will of the drivers. George Russell's head of the GPDA, the union they have for the drivers. So I think if everyone is saying let's change Monaco, suddenly the onus is there. Whereas really before, I think people have just almost passed the buck a little bit, and it feels like this was actually quite a key year for that.
Yeah, that's an interesting point that I don't think people realize, that there are races that are either outright owned by Liberty Media and F1, and then there are races like Monaco where there is far less say, and the organization running the sport has far less influence on the decisions they make about the circuit, whether it's competitive or not. Monaco is definitely one of those. It is, you're going to be my focus group, both of you, for my solution. Okay. And it's antithetical to only one real part of the F1 experience. And it's a big part, though. Everyone's talking about changing the circuit. I think you need to change the car. Retro car. If you're
I've heard that. You're not the first person to suggest it.
Good, because it's a great idea.
Don't tell him that.
It just sounds expensive, right?
Yeah.
Sorry, it was a really good idea, and you're the first person I've ever heard say it.
That's brilliant. That is all a man wants to hear, Jessica, about anything.
I got you back. I got you back, Spence. Don't worry.
That's amazing.
I mean, I feel like the easiest solution is like you can't change your tires if there's a red flag in Monaco, or you have to do an extra mandatory. You have to have more than the two tire compounds. But I think that, Spencer, a lot of people prefer your way, which is just have cars that can actually pass each other again.
Tiny car, yeah, just like let's
go race,
right?
Based on qualifying, yeah,
basically a glorified kart race. Just take it back. This is not, and it's not something. It's something that has been done within circuits before, not F1, but certainly within other racing circuits, using a different type of car. I'm not saying you go to like straight shaft, all open wheel, open cockpit, death traps. I'm sure there's somebody who just heard that and really thinks it's a good idea. You're an insane person, and I kind of love you for that. And I think there's probably one or two drivers who would really be thrilled to try that. Only one or two, though. I think most of them would be horrified by that notion. But a smaller car.
With this plan, would you still get the points for the Sunday race, or would you lean into the Nate Saunders proposal of points on Sunday and then you just have a fun race? Sorry, points on Saturday. You just have a fun race on Sunday.
I think I love the dual proposal, because anyone who buys a ticket or wants that experience sees qualifying, sees the modern beast on that track, and you get the merging of the modern and the pre-modern, right? And then on Sunday, we do the nostalgia race, and everybody lines up in their little sleds, and you get an actual competitive race where everybody is 13 again. Like that would be my best Monaco. Now, does that somewhat demean the track? No, because real points are still up for grabs, right? You just get them on Saturday, and then you run the Sunday race as a novelty.
The one thing with that is that they already kind of do this 2 weeks before Monaco. They have the Monaco Classic. So when they've already built the circuit, you probably saw Adrian Newey and Zach Brown kind of racing against each other. And it is great. But I think what you notice when there's smaller cars, I mean, it would be different if there's 20 F1 drivers driving them, actually. It would be a lot more fun. But you notice with some of those cars, like some of the level in the Monaco Classic, the level of talent is very, very mixed, let's say. So you have one guy like disappearing in the distance, and you have two guys who can barely get through turn one, and you're like, this isn't what I thought I was watching, So I think actually, in that sense, 20 F1 drivers driving like the 1988 cars would be pretty cool.
I mean, Logan Sargent's still out there, so.
This is meant to be an American podcast. I thought this would be Team Logan.
Yeah. We're pro and anti people that would shock you. This is a Yuki Tsunoda podcast.
We like winners. That's why we like Yuki.